Denise is a research lead at Turo, and what really stood out to me about Denise when we first met was she is a born and bred storyteller. So I know coming to a conference, the expectation is already high. You have to tell a good story to be compelling. But Denise is going to bring to life other ways to do that in your day-to-day research to elevate the impact of the work. So please welcome Denise.
Awesome. Oh, is my mic on? There you go. All right. Thank you for that great introduction. So I just want to start today by having us take a moment to really drop into this space, this beautiful historic building, Fort Mason. Take a deep breath. Can you guys smell that salty air that surrounds us? Have you looked out the windows? We've got the Golden Gate Bridge on one side and Alcatraz Island on the other. And we are surrounded by the San Francisco Bay, this cold, dark, murky water. When you look out onto that water, what does it make you feel? What emotions come up for you? Are you curious about the wilderness that lives out in there? Are you maybe feeling a little bit of fear, like is it full of predators, maybe sharks? Would you believe me if I told you that this water out here, this is my swimming pool, and I swim out here almost every single morning. And most of the time, I'm not really worried for my life. I'm just out there with my best friends, watching the sun come up, and counting down the minutes until I can get into a nice, hot sauna. However, a couple years ago, I was swimming out here in the bay, literally right here outside this very building of Fort Mason, when something brushed up against my leg, something very big. And then that something big, its jaws clamped down on my left shin. Oh, I just saw your face, right? What emotions are coming up for you right now? If you want me to tell you the rest of the story, you might need to grab onto the hand of the person next to you. No, I mean it. Hold their hand. If you're too nervous to do that, hold onto your own hand. Okay, so I'm out here, I'm swimming, something big clamps down onto my shin. And what happens next? You guys, I had been bitten by a 200-pound harbor seal. I have seen these seals and sea lions out here in the bay, but I had no idea that one of them was going to come after me for breakfast. This is a true story. I was really lucky. I looked down, I realized, okay, I'm not bleeding, and I took off and I swam the fastest mile of my life back to shore. And when I crawled out of that beach, I was like, I have just had the craziest psychedelic experience of my life. And what actually happened was my relationship to the bay and the creatures that are in the bay had changed forever. Okay, so why am I telling this story? This is a really good, crazy story, and it is 100% true. But it's also a way that I can share data with you about marine life in the Bay Area and its relationship to humans. Okay, but I could have also said it like this, a format that we're all much more comfortable with, right? A nicely designed slide with a title like, Understanding User Intent of Our Target Seal Market. And I could have just turned and read out one of my bullet points. Increased rates of swimming in the bay drive up seal encounters. But which one of those versions is the most memorable, right? I mean, I saw your faces. When I'm telling my story, you're gripped. Maybe you're gripping onto the hand of the person next to you. You're having a moment. When you walk out of here, it's not this bullet point that you're going to remember. It's this crazy story of this woman up on stage who's swimming out here with seals, right? So which version really hooks you in? It's that story. When you are putting up slides with some bullet points, a lot of you just check out, you look at your phones, your attention is elsewhere. But this story that's full of rich details and emotions that connected you to the person next to you, That's what really locks you in and maybe even motivated you to take action, either to run as far away from this water as possible, or maybe for a few of you to perhaps come and join me for a swim in the bay. That feeling of being locked in together, of really wanting to do something with what you're learning, that's the feeling that we want to create with our insights, right? If we want our execs and our leadership to remember our work and do something with it. I'm here today to tell you that you are better than your deck. Your research, your stakeholders, they deserve more. Okay, what's wrong with a traditional deck or a traditional report the way that we've been doing it? Well, I'll show you using some of my own that I have built while I've been working at Turo, a peer-to-peer car rental company. What's wrong with these decks? Boring titles, titles full of jargon. The same cover photo, just sort of switched up a little bit each time. The standard branded template that no one can stand to look at anymore. We all know that we live in an attention economy, right? We are distracted by so much information all the time, even in the middle of a meeting at work. If people aren't drawn in, they are not there at all. Now, we need to do this together, okay? At this point in my career, I don't think of myself as a researcher. I'm a salesperson, and I'm not just selling research, I'm selling collective effervescence. And you have to say it that way. Collective effervescence is the feeling of being part of something bigger than oneself, where individual emotions come together into a collective experience. Hopefully that's what we are all feeling in this room right now. Collective effervescence is what happens when we have a moment that transcends the ordinary, right? And we share that with others. And that's what I'm trying to create, those moments, with every single research deliverable. Now, lucky for us, these transcendent moments, they can be engineered. These are the 3 tactics that I use so that my stakeholders and my executives are feeling a transcendent moment with my research, and they are motivated to take action, right? This is what we are going to be doing together today. All right, first tactic, tell a real human story. One challenge for us as researchers is that our insights are often pretty obvious, right? Put together a report and it's like, oh, yeah, duh. You can turn a mundane insight into something new and exciting by telling a real human story. I don't want you to just describe a user's pain point. I want you to force people to feel the pain. Here's an example. I did a study that found that users don't like friction in the booking flow. Of course they don't. Who wants friction in a booking flow when you're trying to shop for something? And I was like, okay, how am I going to make this new and interesting so that my product team will actually do something about it? So this is what I did. I brought everyone into a room, and at the beginning of my presentation, I told everyone to sit there with their eyes closed for a full 30 seconds. And I played this. That is very loud in this room. Okay, that is the embodied feeling of friction. And 30 seconds is a really long time to make people feel physically uncomfortable. But what did this do? This got everyone into a shared, embodied experience together, into a lot of discomfort that they wanted to end, right? That is what motivates people to actually feel our users' pain and do something about it. It forced us all into a moment together, right? One that we wanted to stop. Thank you for sitting through that. Okay, another way to tell a real human story, let the real human tell their story for themselves. I once did a diary study where I paid people to rent a car with my company for the first time and document their whole experience, right? The highs and lows. It was a super successful story. We learned a lot. But I really wanted to extend that impact, right? I wanted to be sure that product change was going to come out of it. So I did something that was a little risky. I invited one of the participants to come back for a live Q&A on Zoom for 30 minutes. I invited anyone from the company that wanted to attend and just ask him questions directly. This wasn't the actual guy, but it did kind of look like this. It was a little risky, but this guy showed up. He got to tell his own experience from his own life of how much he travels for work, and how his first Turo experience just didn't really work for him. And everyone got to ask him questions directly. This worked out, and in the end, this worked out really well. Our head of product was there, and before he left, he turned to me and he said, "Thank you, Denise. That was really interesting." When an executive tells you something is really interesting, you know that you have captured their attention for the full time. And I knew he was going to walk out of there, and as he was making product strategy moving forward, this guy was going to be living rent-free in his head. Final example for telling a real human story. I once presented at a company all-hands about a trip to our customer support call centers in South America. And I could have just led with our most interesting data point that I learned while I was out there. 40% of our customer support agents have never driven a car. That is a very compelling statistic for a company whose product is letting people drive cars. But I thought about it, and my goal with this presentation was to help the product team get resources to improve the technology that these call center agents use, right? How do we get the whole company rallied around this goal? I was like, I'm going to tell a real human story. So I did. I talked about the avocados that you eat down in Peru and how delicious they are. They're called palta. I told a story about sitting in traffic for 2 hours in Bogota on the bus just to get to our call centers, which is what our agents do every day. And I got to talk about Sandra, who is getting her master's in creative writing and providing customer support to people in Spanish, in English, and in French. I had the whole company rallied around these agents. The chat in the Zoom was going off. My CEO was sitting in the front seat. His phone was down, and he was completely transfixed with me. What happened? I realized people are just hungry for real stories and for fewer charts. And after that, we got the resources together to change the technology to improve the daily life of people like Sandra. And sure, maybe it wasn't all about my stories of the avocados, but it definitely helped. Okay, tactic number 2, make your research way more approachable. Think about a conversation maybe you had here in this room just this morning with somebody new that you just met. You probably weren't talking to them using like a bunch of jargon. You were finding points of connection and making it easy for them to get to know you, right? You can do the same thing with your research. I love a really good analogy, okay? So here's an example. I recently ran a study about the end-to-end experience of a customer support journey. And just saying it that way makes me want to run off the stage. But the core research question here was, how do support contacts begin? What is the origin story of a problem? So I thought, well, what is the greatest origin story ever told? The book of Genesis. I created some AI slop, and I kicked off the entire readout with this. It was really relatable. It told the story from the very beginning. My CEO was in there. She burst out laughing, and she was like, I totally get it. All right, in the beginning, there were cars, and on day 2 came the problems. Make it really approachable. Okay, have you ever worked on something that maybe you're really passionate about, but then you put it out there and you give it a really boring title like competitive benchmarking of the user experience? Don't do that. Don't do that. One great way to make your work really approachable, to really sell it, is to give it a really good title, right? Use language that you would use every day outside of work. Here's an example. I have been working on this project where I've been interviewing the executives at my company at Turo about business strategy. I put these videos together and I share them out on Slack. I have a budget of about $5. I am trying to get a budget of more than $5. So I was thinking, how do I do that? How do I sell this? I call it all up in your business. Yeah, I hear your laughs. People are immediately drawn in. They think it's funny. Their attention is captured. But also, when they see this title, All Up in Your Business, they immediately get what the project is going to be about, right? People like this. Make it really approachable. Final example for this. The most approachable thing to do with your data is to actually give people the primary source data themselves, right? You're probably sitting on some really great transcripts, maybe interview transcripts. Maybe, like me, you have transcripts between users and your AI chatbot. I don't know if you've ever read those. Think about the conversations you're having with ChatGPT, right? They're funny and surprising and probably informative. I got my entire design team together, and I told them to do some dramatic retellings of the transcripts. People loved this. We were all in a room together. Actually, even some folks were on Zoom. They were so excited to be doing something together, to be making a transcendent moment together. This is my boss right here. He brought in like a Halloween wig because he wanted to play out one of our users. And then we also had some designers dressing up as robots as the chatbot themselves, right? So what resulted was actually a really rich conversation about how to design for a non-deterministic product. But we got to do it by sharing in a moment together, a transcendent moment, if you will. Collective effervescence. Okay, final tactic. Design like a content creator. I'm pretty sure that no one ever comes home after a long day of conferencing and pours themselves a glass of wine and says, I can't wait to pull up my favorite Google slide deck. No, what are you doing? You're watching Real Housewives. You're scrolling on your phone through TikTok. Maybe you're like me and you're listening to episode after episode of how I built this podcast every night. Do you guys listen to how I built this? I'm obsessed with Guy Raz. I never want to be an entrepreneur, but I can listen to him talk to entrepreneurs all day long. Why is that? Deconstruct what makes that content really compelling and use that to inspire your next research deliverables. Make stuff that people want to consume and that they want to share. Last year, I decided that I never wanted to make a slide ever again. Obviously, I haven't been successful because I'm showing you some slides. But I did teach myself how to edit videos with Descript. I don't know if anyone here works for Descript, but if you do, I'm like your #1 fangirl. So my coworker and I made a video podcast series for a longitudinal study that we were running. We released 4 episodes. And the final one was the full synthesis in place of a big readout. These episodes, they had intrigue, they had data, and they had your 2 favorite researchers co-hosting them. We shared it out on Slack. We used them as a pre-read before meetings. People watched this. You know what else it had? It had captions. People love captions. Our head brand strategist came up to me in the kitchen one morning and said, I was watching your videos on my phone, on the bus, on the way into work, instead of listening to music. I mean, it was like I had won just right there, right? People want to be entertained. They want to be consuming content in the way that they are, outside of work all day long. This can be more effective than a traditional report because people are paying attention. Then they themselves are sharing it out, and they are creating a moment with others. Okay, another example, maybe don't just post your updates on Slack. Turn your updates into something that perhaps looks like a Substack. This is something that's really easy to pull together using Claude or another AI tool, right? show up in the format of the content that you know people are already consuming in a way that is easily shareable. Okay, I have my last example. I saved my favorite last example for last. A lot of us are back in the office now, right? Being back in the office means that you have a captive audience of people that you work directly with and some that you don't. What is one place all those people go where you know you will have an audience? The bathroom. Everyone goes to the bathroom. And most of them are staring at the back of the bathroom stall. And they are doing this more than once a day. That is a captive audience. I worked with one of my favorite product designers who is an incredible illustrator who has never said no to any of my ridiculous ideas to make some comics of some of my data points, right? We call it the pit stop. And we put this content where we know people are going to see it the most, in the bathroom. There's a QR code that leads to the report or the video podcast. But the point is, I want you to think about what captures people's attention, what is shareable, what will spark a conversation. These have been a huge hit in my office. And I can see one of my coworkers here just nodding his head. People were going to the bathroom and they were having a transcendent moment, right? Then they're sharing these out on Slack. They're showing them to folks who are in our other offices or people working from home. These are also the kind of research deliverables that bring consumer insights to everyone at the company, not just the people that you are immediately working with. So I know that many of you work at companies where you can't get away from producing a deck or perhaps like an 8-page report. These examples that I've shown, they can work alongside them, right? I'm not asking you to like fully break up with your relationship with these reports. Oh, that wasn't the slide that I wanted. What I'm asking you to do is perhaps to open up the relationship a little bit, to be kind of non-monogamous with that final report, with that final deck. All of these examples I've shown you, they can work together in concert with that final report. You can try them all. So I urge you today to kind of go out and just try one of these tactics, right? Try it with a low-risk study, maybe just some formative insights that you're sharing with a smaller group. See what works for you. These have been working for me. I am noticing that people really remember my data insights. They're getting quoted back to me. They're showing up on product roadmaps 6 months later. It's elevating the platform of our whole research team. This is all about raising your visibility at work, right? Motivating having actual influence on motivating change. And it's also, you can tell, I love qualitative research and the tactics that really underpin it, but I really believe as we are doing this, we are bringing the most human element into our work, and we are keeping ourselves from having AI replace really the best part of what we do. Try it out, report back, let me know. And hopefully, if nothing else, I have at least brought us all together to have an effervescent experience, and maybe one or two of you are going to come and join me for a swim. Thank you. And I have my first swimmer right here.
There we go, I'm jumping in. Denise absolutely rocked it, and I saw almost everyone taking notes, so we're gonna have time for one question. Oh, wow. Okay, quick hand.
I actually have two questions, but the first one is, are you okay? Seriously, you got big.
Physically, I was fine, but emotionally, who knows?
Okay.
I had a couple bruises on my shin. I was really lucky. It didn't break the skin. What happens if something like that ever happens to you, and it won't, but who knows? If it does break the skin, you need to go to the ER and get some special antibiotics. I have heard sometimes they give you a rabies shot, but pinnipeds do not have rabies. Yeah, but it's been sort of a good story ever since, and every time I come in contact with a seal or a sea lion now, it's like, I know we have a special relationship. But thank you for asking. Very
Yeah,
sweet of you.
and I mean, this was just like such an amazing talk, and I love I think this is what brings like the fun to our job. So thank you for reinforcing that. But I was wondering if you have any like storytelling frameworks that you follow, like the Pixar one, or like the hero's journey, or if you're just kind of like vibing.
The hero's journey is a great one. You know, something that I've been thinking, I mean, maybe I am vibing quite a bit, but what I like to think about is the way to land a really good story. You have to really think about the sort of 3 core parts. The first is your voice. What makes you a really good storyteller? The second is your data. How does the data itself want to be told? Let's say you are doing some research on like a really sensitive topic with vulnerable populations, but you're a funny person. Those 2 things probably aren't going to go well together. And the third is your audience. How do they need to hear it? A room like you guys versus maybe your execs versus some engineers, they're going to need to hear things differently. So what you really want to do is you want to line those things up. Your voice, your data, and your audience. And when you can get all 3 of those working in concert together, that's when you can land a really good story.
Thank you.
Awesome. Huge thank you to Denise. I think she absolutely rocked that presentation. And it's hard to make storytelling at a conference come to life, but Denise absolutely crushed it. So huge thank you to Denise.